Leadership is hard, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is that I can't make it any easier, but the good news is that we can work on it together to get better. And you want to know the secret? Who you are comes before what you do. It's form before function. So let's get to work together. I'm Preston Poore, and this is PQ. Today's guest is the founder of a leading national franchise, OfficePride Commercial Cleaning Services, and the author of best-selling books like The Janitor and Stop Using the B Word. His unique approach to blending faith and business has not only built a successful company, but has inspired countless leaders to rethink their approach to productivity and purpose. You're about to hear from a true leader in every sense of the word. Todd, welcome to the show. Hey, so Todd, can you take us back to the origins of OfficePride and how it evolved from a simple MBA class project that you had into a national success story and franchise?
Well, the MBA there was a small group. This was at Butler University. And we had a visiting professor from Harvard, an entrepreneur professor. And so he broke us up into small groups and we all created our own business. And the interesting thing is that there was a lady in my group who had started a cleaning business, and she really sold me on the concept and the value, and started basically with no money. And so I was real interested in doing that. And then she kind of had started one and was failing. I kept thinking about how I would do it differently. So that sparked my interest. And then my final class at Butler was an independent research paper on how to franchise in the commercial cleaning business. So I decided to take this a step further and got class credit for it. And then my college research paper became my business plan. So that's how that all started. And I was interviewing people from all around the country that own cleaning companies, asking them if they could do it all over again, knowing what they know now, how would they create the perfect cleaning company? And so I took that research, started OfficePride, and was off and running. But from the very beginning, franchising was in the plan. So I had to create the model. And that took 3 years to build a model that someone else would want to duplicate. And then we began franchising.
That's awesome. So you're commercializing this idea. Tell me about the franchising process from an entrepreneur perspective. You start this business. I imagine that's the same way that back in the day, McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or whatever started, right? With this idea, they build a small thing around it, then people come in and buy. How does that work in your world?
So I was a little different than a lot of franchise concepts. There was a existing business that then chose to expand using the franchising model, or someone else came in and bought that business and then used the franchise model as an expansion strategy. For me, the franchising was part of my original business plan before I ever created the model. And so I created the model. That took 3 years. We started in 1992, sold the first two in February of 96. And it was in 1995 that I reached out. I hired a consulting firm to help me develop all the things that are involved in creating a franchise system, from operations manuals and the legal franchise disclosure documents and those sorts of things. But they helped me a lot because they were able to ask questions and take out of my head all of my systems and processes and start to document those. And I learned from that experience because I became pretty decent at documenting processes and systems moving forward, which is key to any franchise system.
Sure. That's awesome. So this entrepreneurial bent that you have, because if you're thinking, you obviously a person of vision, and knew where you wanted to go, if you're thinking about the franchise, take 3 years to think through that. Where did this bent come from? Your desire to start a new business?
My dad was a business owner. He was a real entrepreneur. All kinds of things he would do to make money, and I watched that. And then I was always that way too, even as a small kid. In the second grade, I started my first business. I was selling gumballs at the elementary school. Gum wasn't allowed, so there was some good markup. There was high demand. It was a very profitable business.
You're a gum dealer, in other words.
I was a gum dealer until the teachers closed me down, but they were right there with me for a while. I mean, I was like the little entrepreneur in the elementary school. I was in the second grade, but one day the fifth grade teacher comes in there with a $10 bill saying, Todd, you got change for a 10? I mean, I had a big brown bag of money over in the corner where I would get change for people. And of course, no one would steal from you. So I just left the money
Sure.
there at the school because I didn't want my parents to ever know I was selling gum at the elementary school. But so my bubblegum days, selling days were over, but my entrepreneurial desires were just beginning. To this day, that's probably by profit margin the best business I ever had. But when then I did things in high school, custom pocket knives. I mean, everything. It's just crazy. My brother and I we had pigs. I mean, it was all kinds of things that we would do to make money. So we both were entrepreneurs from the beginning. I think God wired us that way when He knitted us together in our mother's womb.
Yeah, so good. So you've got this bent toward that. Um, how is that showing up then in terms of the way you relate to people? This entrepreneurial bent. How does it impact the way that you interact with associates or whatnot? Because I think you've got a certain gift for that. You have a risk tolerance is probably higher than other people. Excuse me, but not everybody's got that, right?
Yeah.
So you surround yourself from a leadership perspective. Tell me about how, as a leader, how do you balance that need to lead people, but also being an entrepreneur and looking ahead to drive something that's new?
Yeah. So interesting enough, my risk tolerance is very low.
Really?
Most people would say, oh, Todd's risk tolerance is an 8 on a scale of 10. I would say it's a 1 or 2
Really?
because anything I've done, I've thought about it and processed it and played the tape forward, mainly because my number one strength finder is futuristic. So the entrepreneur in me can see potential in other people to answer your first part of your question. So when I start hearing about them and their ideas, I immediately start thinking of what could happen and where that could go and how they could expand and grow. But at the same time, the futuristic in me triggers what could go wrong. And that creates a significant amount of caution. So my risk tolerance actually is very low. Um, but so I would say I strategically move forward. I'm motivated by growth and scale. But I don't take risks. At least by the time I'm taking action, it's no longer a big risk for me in my own head.
Certainly. And I imagine, though, being an entrepreneur, you probably, even though you've taken calculated risks, right? Sounds
Yeah.
like that sounds maybe a good phrase. Maybe I would say it, is that I'm going to say maybe failed at some things before. Have you actually failed in some of these things? And if so, what have you learned?
I don't know of something I've started and failed at. I've had failures along the way,
Okay.
certainly even within Office Pride. There's things that would not go as I'd hoped. But as far as launching a business that failed, I don't think I've had one. At least if I did, I've blocked it out of my memory.
Knock
But
on wood, right? So there
you
you
got to
go.
realize it's been Office Pride since 1992,
Yeah,
so
sure.
over 30 years. And now my new business, which is the Strategic Banking Network. And so that's a whole nother vision to cast.
Yeah.
But a lot of little businesses as a kid, but
No failures.
no
So
failed
look,
businesses yet.
allow me to adjust the question then. How about an idea that you had that didn't work out? Is there something that you said, okay, this is going to be great for our organization, but it didn't pan out the way that you thought it did? And
Oh
I'm not
man.
looking for failures. I know you've got a ton of success too. I guess really what I'm trying to get for the listener is maybe some learnings that you've had in your journey where you faced adversity or a
Yeah.
failure and how you dealt with that.
Well, certainly launching a new brand that currently doesn't exist. Even Office Pride 1992, it didn't exist. So I'm going around trying to help people see that I'm starting this janitorial business. And I will always use the word we. Oh, we can do this, we can do that. And it was just me. I had one guy challenge me one time, he said, who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket? And I never forget that. But I always use we. And I just saw it being more than me from the beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, as it grew, it was way more than me. Took a lot of wonderful people, but vision casting and getting those first customers to believe in you, that was the biggest challenge. I it's so important to get those first followers, but man, it's hard to get them. And once you get them, then you can start to build on that. And the same way, not just in customers like buildings to clean, but also getting those first franchisees. So I was fortunate to get my first two franchisees right away. One of them was a customer, and the other one was a guy that I was going to church with. So that happened real quickly. And then, I was able to build an example out of them that others would want to copy. So, but the challenge was just getting those first customers. There were a few times when I really started to wave the white flag a little bit in prayer, just asking God to give me some favor.
Sure.
And he did.
That's awesome. So I want to ask you, you said you started the organization in 1992 when you started doing all this. How many franchises has it grown to right now?
Oh, we're over 150. So we took the pathway of, we'd rather have fewer franchisees who are bigger, successful, they're happy, they're fulfilled, they're glad they did it, than to have a large number of franchisees that maybe aren't hitting those targets. So we've had good, solid, steady growth year over year, and we're at a little over 150 franchises.
That's great. And what do you look for in a franchisee, Todd?
Well, my number one would be a can-do attitude. I was just thinking about that a couple of days ago, and the number one thing that I look for is, do they have a can-do attitude, or is through our conversations, are they already making some type of an excuse of why something can't get done, or they can't make the call, or whatever. So I look for a can-do attitude, because that'll get you through a lot of tough times. And then, of course, we have a special culture at OfficePride. We're looking for people that's going to fit in well. We're looking for people who's got the capacity for growth, somebody who has the capability to manage at least 20 people. I mean, some franchisees may have hundreds of employees, but if they just don't have a proven capability to at least manage people and grow and relate to customers, then we're probably not the best fit for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly that makes sense, because I imagine scaling and getting to 150 was not it was not an easy thing for you to do. What's challenging from your perspective, and I don't want to lead the witness on this, but once the organization's at 150 franchises versus 2, what's that like from a founder and a president like you were? And I know you're in a different capacity now, but during that journey you're in, what's that like? What's that growth like? How do you handle that?
Well, the big difference is you're doing it through other people. So you have other people in those positions who are in charge of the recruiting or the training and all these things. When it was just 2, I was doing all of that, right? And I knew how I wanted it, and I was making those decisions along the way. And then as you scale, you have to be able to communicate your why. You have to build a team who can think the way you would like for them to think, as they select, as they train, as they commit to help people grow their business. So that's the biggest difference. And if you don't do that, it can start to look a little different. So it's a whole new challenge as you build a team. So like our team now, 25 people on the corporate staff, they can get a whole lot more done. I always try to hire people that were better at that specific job than I was at that job. Yeah. So even though I could do all the things to some degree, there were always people who could do any of those better than me. Mm-hmm. Couldn't do all of them better than me probably, but they definitely, in each area, there were people who could do that role better. And once we built that team, they then collectively were better able to serve the franchisees than I ever could. Mm-hmm. So that's where you want to get to, is that place where you have a team that are, just doing better than you can imagine.
Yeah, that's good. Great word on that. Now, as someone who mentors entrepreneurs, what are some common growth pitfalls, and how do you guide leaders to overcome them as you're engaging them?
I think cash flow is always one. And then it's just being, I think the way to guide them is to just make sure they're paying attention to it, and they're projecting the impact their decisions are going to have on future cash flow. So just helping them strategically think that through. That's a big deal. And when the economy is changing, whether it's going up or down, sometimes you can grow yourself out of cash, and then sometimes you can decline and not bring in enough cash. So that's a critical one. People relationships. So I think entrepreneurs, there's been seasons when they struggle finding people. There have been seasons when they struggle managing people, trying to get the people to, as they grow their business, to truly represent what they want the business to look like. So a lot of, everybody's a little different, really. So when I coach CEOs, I don't go to them with like, this is a plan you should plug into to grow. I'm like, let me be an extension of your brain. Let me help you think through what you're thinking through, and maybe even let me help you think of some things you might want to think about to accomplish what you're trying to achieve. So it's all over the board, and I just try to look at it individually with each entrepreneur.
That's great. And let's pivot now. Thanks for your feedback and all that. Let's pivot to your life as an author. You've written, 6 or 7 books? Is that right now?
It's 5.
Okay. So I've given you a little more credit than that. So maybe you have 6 or 7 in the hopper.
I do.
Yeah, real good. But two that stood out to me as I've engaged your team. One was stop using the B word. And we've I guess, personally chatted a little bit about how provocative that is to most people as they see that. And they think, what does that actually mean? Which I think is a really good job on your part to get that there from a marketing perspective. But you challenge the busy mindset and promote productivity instead. How did this concept for you emerge? And what advice do you give to leaders trapped in the busy cycle?
Okay, that's a great question. So for me, it emerged. First of all, any book I've ever written, I really wrote it to myself, right? Whether it was the janitor wanting work-life balance, whether it was carrot chaser and not chasing the carrots that Satan has a tendency to dangle out there, but yet, how to identify a difference between that and what God wants you to do. Stress less business owner, because I was stressed out and I was looking for answers. So stop using the B word was about really me not wanting to waste my time or my life. Years ago, I really just acknowledged that, hey, I only get to live on this planet one time. I want to make my life count. And really, I got to make sure I'm doing things that matter, that I am productive, because not only do I depend on that and my family depends on that, but my business, our franchisees, our team, they depend on me to do the right things right and not to waste time or have them wasting time. One day I got home from work, and my wife asked me an innocent little question like, "Oh, how was work today?" And your wife's probably asked you that before. And I had a bad day that day, and I just said, man, I felt like I was busy all day, didn't get a single thing done. And I remember the expression on her face. She was not impressed by that answer. I mean, if you think about it, here I had been gone all day, and it occurred to me that, you know what, when I leave the house, when I leave my family, and whatever it is, I owe it to my family that upon my return, I have advanced us in some way. Not been so busy that I didn't get a single thing done. And so it was on that day that I made a commitment that I am not going to label myself as busy anymore. I'm not going to be busy. I'm going to be productive. If people ask me if I'm busy, I'm going to tell them, no, I'm productive. If people call me busy, I'm going to correct them. So I got real passionate about it. And then it was my assistant really was involved in helping me, and I just quit using the B word. And words have power, Preston. I mean, yeah, what I would do is I would catch myself being busy. I go, wait a minute, this is busy work. I'm not letting this define me. And then I would flip the switch and work on something that was productive. And listen, I think people in America and everywhere probably are addicted to distractions, addicted to something that keep them busy. And it's kind of hard to work on important things. So that's where it all started. I shared it with a few folks, and then I started getting good feedback. And the next thing you know, I was writing a book about it.
That's awesome. And I know in the Bible it says in Psalms, and I'm going to paraphrase here, if you will, I don't have it exactly memorized, but Moses is saying, bless the work of our hands and help us to be productive and effective. He doesn't pray, help me to be busy.
Right,
right?
right, right.
So
There's nothing to gain. And people, it's interesting. A lot of people, they think being busy is a good thing. You can say, "Hey, how have you been?" And they go, "Oh, just keeping busy." It's like they're proud of it. It's almost like, "Well, why didn't you achieve your goal?" "Oh, I was too busy." It's like busyness is a trap that they want to be in and they don't want to be in all at the same time.
yeah,
And once we become conscious of that, like I think my productivity increased 4x,
yeah,
but it'll start to drive you crazy at how many people use the word busy without
yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah, sure. And whether they're using the word busy or not, right? That's the behavior that goes and the mindset and the focus. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made at the Coca-Cola company is I'm moving into a new role in strategic merchandising. Had millions and millions of dollars worth of spend, 30 suppliers, just very complex role, 15 people reporting to me on the team. I always joke that's where I lost my hair and it all turned gray. But in that, one of the biggest mistakes I made, Todd, was I went to somebody, I'll never forget the conversation walking in a hallway at Coca-Cola, and I said, "Hey, I want my schedule filled. Just put everything on there. Let's go. I want to be involved in everything." And that was the worst move I ever made because things came on. I lost control of my calendar. I had to work during meetings, which was a cultural thing at Coke too. So I was just joining in the chorus of that. But I found that busyness took away from my productivity. And what I did with the calendar perspective, I started blocking times off.
Yeah.
And so I got smart. I said, okay, I'm going to block off the morning from 8 to 9. I'm going to block lunch off from 11:30 to 1. And then I would block the last hour of the day off between 4 and 5. And so people couldn't dump stuff on during those times. So what that did, it gave me flexibility in the morning to get in and get work done, or I could get in late if I needed to. I could go out and enjoy a lunch with somebody or go work out, or I could leave the office at 5, like I like to, because of an hour commute in Atlanta. And it gave me that flexibility. So it helped me to be more productive as I managed the schedule on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Really the most important meeting I have is my first meeting of the day, and that's with God, just
Sure.
quiet time. But the second most important meeting I have is with myself. And just all right, how am I going to execute the day that's before me in the best and most efficient way possible? And what else can I plug in? But I agree with you. We have to protect margin.
Mhm.
And, some people who have one call after the other, where they're always jumping off a call a minute or two late, arriving in the next one a minute or two late. They're not digesting what they've received or preparing for what's next. It's not the most productive way. There may be some people listening who are good at that, but mostly what I've seen is that's not the case. I always try to at least schedule a block of time between calls if I have calls back to back, minimum 15 minutes.
Yeah, here's a hack for folks. When I worked one of the engagement teams that I led at the Coca-Cola company, we worked on operating effectiveness, and one of those were meeting schedules. And we mandated, that was the leadership mandated, that every meeting lasted just 50 minutes of an hour's block, and you had 10 minutes. And so we compared it to school. When the bell rang, you had 5 to 10 minutes to get to your next class, and then boom, the bell rang again. And that relieved a lot of that stress
Yeah.
in between meetings. That really helped out. So if you're listening as an emerging leader or a millennial, that may be a hack where you intentionally end your meetings, not on the hour, but 10 minutes early so you can make the adjustment, do what you need to do
Yep.
on that. So really good. Hey, let's move real quick to, I want to just briefly cover the Janitor too. I read that on a plane, I think coming to Orlando to come speak to OfficePride. And I thought it was a neat story. And I want to ask you about the genesis of that, the message in it, and why you wrote the book.
Well, I was asking myself the question, how can you build a business without losing your family?
Mm.
These aren't the success of business and family. This is not mutually exclusive. And what's the critical components of that? And so create a fiction story where the janitor bumps into the CEO, and the CEO's got all these, looks successful on the outside, but a lot of problems. And the janitor starts to mentor him because the janitor had been there and done that, right? And his wife had passed, and he was just looking for something to do. And so there's lessons in there, like, one after the other that lead to life balance. And so I just always had that story in my head. And then I asked myself what could be some points that I could put in it. So that was kind of the order that it
Mhm.
happened. And it took a while to put it together, but that's how it started. So this goes back a ways, and it was early in my business career.
But answering that question, and I love the fact you and I've talked a little bit about this in the past, that you can live out your faith in the workplace, and you can have great mentors around you. I remember a friend, I think a mutual friend of ours, Mark Whitaker, who's been on the podcast, said to me one day, he said, "Preston, show me your mentors and I'll show you your future." And so in the Janitor, it's kind of interesting how the CEO is mentored by the janitor, right? And helps him in that and understand that.
Well, and they would meet like once a week and talk about something. But for example, one of those directives, I just asked myself, what's helped me? And one of them was things happen. And when things happen, we don't advance by complaining or pouting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had one of the directives is pray, don't pout.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done actually a whole, I haven't gone back and looked at it in a long time, but I had that on a video or a DVD back then. That was the whole message of pray, don't pout. So there was a whole keynote on that at one time. But just the importance of flipping that switch and, asking Almighty God to help you through something, and to give you some favor, and rather than go around whining and pouting. Listen, as a leader, people don't want to follow leaders that are whining and pouting.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't motivate anybody too well. They want to follow leaders who can not acknowledge that a situation or a problem may exist, but are working on the answer and overcoming it, so that everybody can get where they want to go. And certainly, like one directed there, pray, don't pout, is perfect.
That's awesome.
For that.
And expand on that for me a little bit, Todd. How does your faith impact your leadership style and the way you approach the business?
Well, it impacts it completely, right? So I think everything revolves around that first, because for me, I believe God created me. He had a plan and purpose in mind when he did, because the Bible will talk about those things. A lot of places where the Bible talks about the path before us and the plans that God has for us and all this. And I think he had an original intent. And some people he gave different skills that he gave others. And so some people he gave leadership. I believe, leadership is one of the gifts that he gave me. But so there's this batch of different gifts that he gave different people at different, I would think, levels of gifting. So to me, I just try to pursue the potential God had in mind when he created me. So I'm always asking, just speaking of faith, I'm always saying, God, what is it you want me to do? And I ask him just to kind of live through me that day. I just try to give him each day. Otherwise, I'm off on my own agenda. I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs like to have control. Like I feel perfectly comfortable being in control. So, but my best results come when I let God be in control.
Yeah, it's the surrender in that portion, right? Because we have the things that are plans, things that we want to do. But once we surrender that to him, we start to understand what his purposes are. And then we go to that and help him. That's good. Okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to end up on a couple questions before we go to the hot seat here. Questions. I've mentioned this on most of the podcast interviews I do, Todd. I just want to get your feedback on. I have this leadership philosophy, and maybe you've heard me say it, but it's how is greater than what. And so what I mean by that is how you accomplish something is greater than what you actually achieve. And I share with people all the time, results are table stakes, right? You got to have results in business. Otherwise you're not in business, you go bankrupt, et cetera. But it's how you get there. That's the leadership component, and the way, the approach, the things that you do, make a big, big difference. And it's a key differentiator for people in leadership and emerging leaders and millennials. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, so that's exactly the way I see it. The one time during our strategic planning, I woke up real early, 4:00 one morning. It's like God saying, you're going into a strategic planning meeting and you're not being real clear on your vision. And so I went through a process that morning with a blank sheet of paper, praying, asking God, okay, what is my vision? I'm going to write it down. And I end up with 8 words. Positive impact. This is for OfficePride. The interesting thing is, regardless of what I'm doing, the vision hasn't changed, even with my new thing. But positive impact, perpetual growth, eliminate vulnerabilities, and honor God, glorify God. So there was 8 words. And when I cast that vision to my team and the franchisees and everybody else, what I started to realize is this vision, it wasn't destination focused, to your point, right? Where somebody may have vision, I want to have 1,000 franchise locations. Well, my vision wasn't like that. My vision was journey focused vision. It was more about how we do things along the way than where we end up, which is exactly what you're saying. So the label I put on that is journey focused vision rather than destination focused vision.
It's good.
And I think
Say that again. So let's say that phrase again. So important.
So it's a journey focused vision. And like my vision for OfficePride, my vision for Strategic Thinking Network is more about how we do things along the way rather than where we end up.
Yeah.
Because people are going to remember how they were treated. They're going to remember how you did things. They're going to remember a tough decision where you made the right answer. You did the right thing. They remember that stuff more than what you accomplished in the end.
Yeah, really good. And that's funny. After I've left the Coca-Cola company involved in moving into this new chapter, I don't think about the brands or the products we launched or the different projects I worked on, but I do think about the people. And I
Yeah.
do remember the good times, and I remember the bad ones too, right? And so don't hold resentment, all that, but you do have that and understand how people treated you during, and that's what you walk away with typically
Yeah.
on that. So thank you for expanding on that. Hey, what's next for you? I know you've mentioned the strategic workshop. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's like what God's really put on my heart is and I love teaching. I love creating content. The strategic thinking is something that highly motivates me. And so what God has led me to now is to create an organization, Strategic Thinking Network, which helps entrepreneurs and business owners think through how to scale their business and their kingdom impact, meaning how do they honor God with their business? Let's help grow that part of it too, be who God created us to be. So this is an organization that's not just teaching business owners, and a lot of this is pulling the right things out of their heads. A lot of the answers are in their heads, but I've created tools to help them think strategically about growing their business, but also how that business can be used to do great things for God's kingdom, or God can use it to do great things for his kingdom.
Sure.
So that's what Strategic Thinking Network is. They're quarterly live in-person workshops in Tampa, Florida. And then people can sign up for the whole year, and they come to all 4 workshops. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm putting together the first group of 30 people, and it's coming together really good. So I feel like my 30 plus years at OfficePride has been a training ground for this. I'm really excited about what God's going to do with this. And so we'll see. I'm trying to follow him rather than put my vision out there, because my entrepreneur self wants to jump in, take over, and cast vision and achieve it. And right now I'm just trying to follow God with this and let him bring me the right people.
That's awesome. I love it. So we will put a link in the show notes to what you're doing in the event. I think the first meeting is in January of 2025.
It is January 28th. Yes.
Okay, great. And so we will put the link in the show notes so people can log on and learn more. Sounds good. Hey, as we close out, for listeners tuning in, what's one actionable step that they can take today to lead with more purpose and intentionality? What's one thing you would recommend to people that are listening to you that you've learned about that you would encourage them to do?
With purpose and intention, I would say have some quiet time with God and ask him what he wants you to do and what was his intent when he created you. If you're a believer, if you're not, then you can think about, well, what's your purpose for yourself? But I think a lot of people, most people have a purpose, whether it's purpose they believe God gave them or something that they just firmly believe in. Well, I would start with that. That's kind of end result and work backwards. Now, what I got to do to achieve that? And I happen to believe my purpose comes from God. But regardless of what somebody believes, that same principle works. Because what happens is people get so busy every day that they're living and they completely off track with the purpose that they had predetermined was important to them.
Right.
They're responding to everybody else's email. They're responding to whatever's happening, and they're off track. And so my advice would be get back on track. And with whoever created the track in your mind, and that's a good place to operate.
That's good. Good word. All right. Well, excellent. Let's move into the hot seat. You haven't seen these questions yet in terms of preparation, so I'll just throw these at you. 5 quick ones on it. And you've already mentioned something you do daily around the quiet time, but what's one daily habit that helps keep you grounded outside of the quiet time?
Well, the big one is quiet time. I have a to-do list. Is probably my good habit. I think to-do lists can be a distraction. It depends on what's on the list. But I do have a tendency to, if I think about something, I get it to my to-do list so I can not let it take up brain space and don't forget it. And so that's a good habit for me.
Excellent. Love it. If you could master any skill instantly, what would it be?
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. Why PowerPoint?
Because I just would love to be able to do that really well. And now I'll draw pictures and send it to somebody to do for me. But I'd love to be able to create all my own PowerPoints and just let my creativity transfer over to the PowerPoint presentation.
Right.
That would be a step saved.
I hear you. Okay, good. What's your favorite way to recharge after a long week?
My charge after a long week. I usually spend time with family on the weekends. So that's probably a recharge. There's hobbies and different things and I can do that can take my mind off everything else. So that's a good way for me to recharge. But I'm not like kind of things. I just usually at home with family.
That's good. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? And the way I look at that is how do you recharge, right? Are you around people or not? So what would you consider yourself?
I was a big time extrovert earlier in my life.
Yeah.
And I've shifted more.
Yeah.
My wife is a big time introvert. So that's impacted that. So I can get really charged up around a lot of people if I'm speaking on a stage and all that. So I get a lot of energy from that. But I can also recharge with some downtime. So I'm both. I'm probably in that 50-50 zone now.
Yeah, they call them ambiverts, kind of in the middle, right? So
okay.
On that, so really good. 2 more quick questions. I'm not sure if you drink coffee or not, but if you did, or let's say it was with a Coca-Cola, well, there you go. You got coffee. Good. Who's someone from history that you'd love to have coffee with and why?
A cup of coffee with Jesus. I actually just wrote an introduction to a workshop based on that. That would be one for sure. I like, I'm just going to stick with that.
Okay. Really good. Well, great answers, Todd. Everything you pulled out today, I love the viewpoint that you have from an entrepreneurial perspective, leadership perspective, and then your faith integrated into all of that. And for the listeners today, I think they'll take away some very valuable thoughts, principles, and just you as an example as a leader, entrepreneur, and building and driving a very successful business. And then also making a decision to move into a different chapter and doing something new and giving back the way you are through your strategic thinking network. So it's really good. So thanks for being on P Cubed.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun. I appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on today on P Cubed. And if you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube so you don't miss any of the future episodes. And if you liked this episode and inspired you, make sure you share it with a friend or colleague. And for more leadership insights, you can sign up for my weekly email, The Pulse. The registration link, along with links to Todd's content, can be found in the show notes. And don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram for more updates and inspiration. Thanks for listening. Take care and talk soon.